Okay, so welcome everyone. Again, this is the Fall 2018 inaugural Software Curation and Preservation Community Forum, and it is such a pleasure to be with all of you today. Very quickly, I just want to review the goals of the Software Preservation Community Forums, which are to invite our colleagues to be in community across professional and disciplinary spaces, to participate in this hour-long sort of discussion, alternating with reports about different activities that are ongoing related to software curation, preservation, and reuse. And we're also here, as I mentioned before, to learn about your interests, the challenges and the creative solutions that you are invariably coming up with in the software preservation community. So I just want to make a quick plug to remind everyone that if you do have specific topics or questions that you would like us to address in a subsequent forum, that the link has been provided in the meeting notes and agenda for this meeting, which I will now put into the chat box, and will also be made available as part of the contextual resources for the recording. Okay, and so with that, we'll get to the good stuff. We're going to kick this off with a series of network reports, starting with Jonathan Farberwitz from the Guggenheim. Jonathan will ask that you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your position at the Guggenheim, and then provide your report. And I'll be in the background taking notes. Take it away.
All right, so I'm going to turn on my video. Can you all see me?
Yes, you look great.
Thanks. So I'm Jonathan Farberwitz. My position at the Guggenheim is called the Fellow in the Conservation of Computer-Based Art. And that means that I'm looking at all of the software computer-based works in our collection. So we have about 25 of those works where software or computer technologies are used as are kind of important in the conceptual part of the work. So it's using software as a artistic medium, like an artist created website, an installation that uses a microcontroller to control physical things in the installation, or it could be just custom code, custom software that's produced as art. So we are part of the cohort of the Software Preservation's FCOP project, and that's Fostering a Community of Practice. That's what it stands for, I believe.
Yes, good job, John.
Okay. So we are the only art museum in that cohort. The other institutions are University of Arizona, the Living Computer Museum and Labs, the University of Virginia, Georgia Tech, and the University of Illinois. So I guess what I'm going to talk about is our kickoff meeting that happened on August 2nd and August 3rd. But I guess maybe I can stop for a minute if anyone has any questions about what I'm doing at the Guggenheim. Okay. So yeah, so the kickoff meeting for the FCOP project happened in early August, and it took place at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. So like the heart of Silicon Valley, right next to Google. And the purpose really of the meeting was to, I think there are a few goals. One, I think, was kind of to solidify the cohort. Oh, thanks for the question. I will post, once I stop talking, I'll post a link to some of our current work. We have a few blog posts about the project. And I should say, the initiative that my fellowship is a part of is called Conserving Computer-Based Art. We also call it CCBA, and we're hoping to get more of a kind of CCBA landing page on the Guggenheim website. So hopefully that's coming up in the future, and we'll have more of a distinct web presence. But also part of the Conserving Computer-Based Art initiative is that we have this ongoing collaboration with New York University's Department of Computer Science. So Professor Dina Engel and her students work on case studies of some of our software-based artworks. So, oh yeah, so back to the kickoff meeting. So I think one of the goals was definitely to solidify the group as a cohort, see kind of common threads in the concerns we were having with some of our software, and also identify organizations that we could reach out to. And also, as part of the project, we're going to be doing some kind of cohort, more kind of public facing dissemination of the findings of our research projects. So each member of the cohort has research projects, a specific research project at their institution. And so part of the meeting was to scope out our research for the next kind of 6-month period, and to also think about what we could do as a cohort, as a group, to disseminate our research. So one of those things was looking at upcoming conferences. Maybe we could do a panel at an upcoming conference in the next year or two, or a workshop. And other suggestions were to do a TED Talk, more kind of like a bigger public arena, like a TED Talk or a podcast about our work on software preservation. So I'll just take a moment here to go into the Guggenheim's research project for FCOP. And that research project is to look at metadata for software-based artworks. So we know that there are many projects and research ongoing with looking at what's the information that you need to collect about a piece of software, about a piece of hardware. But in the art world, I think we have several specific concerns. One of those is that most of our software is custom. It's not commercial software. The other concern is that if we recreate an artwork or we rerun the software, we want to make sure that what's rerunning is an experience that's true to the work defining properties of the artwork. So things like colors and speed, and many other factors have to be authentic to the original artwork. So it's not just about getting the thing to open or getting the thing to run. We have a bit of a more stringent requirement on how it should function. So we're with all these concerns, we're looking at, okay, so can we think about perhaps a minimum amount of information that we need to capture about our software and hardware now, so that we have an easier time later. And we're also incorporating emulation. And emulators is a way to look at, okay, so if you're going to run this artwork in an emulator, what are the settings you need to think about? What's the salient information that you need to choose an emulator? So that's kind of the basis of our research project. So the meeting happened over 2 days, and
what's the name of the software that you use in the
Oh, sorry, is someone talking?
I think you got it, Jonathan. Yeah, I think I just, did someone have a question or?
Yeah. Thought someone maybe had a question. Oh, okay. I guess not. I'll just keep going on about the meeting. So we were happy that the staff from the Computer History Museum also participated in this kickoff meeting, which I thought was a great addition. And on Friday, on the 3rd, we got a tour of the Computer History Museum Shustek Center, which is where they do a lot of processing of collections that come into their museum. And so overall, it was a great experience, and I think we definitely gelled, I think, as a cohort.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Sure.
Before we transition to Monique's update, could you tell us, or could you type in your Twitter handle and then tell us where to find you this fall, aside from iPres in Boston, in case people want to ask you questions in person?
Yeah. Where can they find me? I guess email is probably the best method, but where? I don't think I'm going to any conferences this fall other than iPres. Yeah, email. And we were also happy. We have our Media Lab in New York City, and we're happy to give anyone a tour who's interested. And I'm going to type my email in here, and you can let me know.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And if you don't mind, I will put that also into the meeting notes as
Sure.
well. Okay. With that, we will hand it off to Monique. And I would also take this opportunity to invite all of you, if you did have a question during that period for Jonathan, or more generally about some of the topics that Jonathan raised, it will be easiest for us to keep track of them and make sure that they are answered if you can type them into the chat box. That would be great. Thank you so much. Monique, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Let's see. Can you all see me?
Yes.
Okay,
Looks
cool.
good.
Okay. I'm putting a link to the OSF page in the chat box. But first, just to introduce myself, I'm Monique Lasser. I'm the Digital Preservation Librarian at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And today I'll be talking about the community standards for 3D data preservation, community of practice / grant. So CS3DP is basically it's a project, kind of a forum, a working group project that accompanies a grant funded by IMLS specifically it's for Washington University libraries, University of Iowa libraries, and University of Michigan Museum of Paleontology. The 3 PIs are from those institutions. But the grant project is basically to develop standards around 3D data, but also to hold a set of forums. So to bring people together in order to get this work done. So we had 2 forums, and the first forum was in February of 2018. And that was at, That was at University, it was Washington University, excuse me. It's been a lot of travel this year. So that was at WashU. And we had a forum there to basically get everyone together. I think there were probably about 70 people. And there were people from paleontology, archaeology, from medicine, health sciences, people who actually had 3D data repositories. They were managers of 3D data repositories. People from lawyers, well known in the field of LIS, were there. And we were basically there to, understand what 3D data is and the challenges around 3D data. So we had a series of presentations from a number of people, like Kieran Nevin, some people from University of Indiana, some people from Stanford around metadata. We had some presentations, and then we had 5 working groups. We broke it into 5 working groups during the 2.5-day forum. And there were 5 working groups. And these working groups were geared around the issues, the major challenges when it comes to preserving 3D data. So the first one was preservation, then management / storage. So really figuring out what you need to actually manage storage of 3D data. Access, copyright, and then metadata. And so we basically, we had to charge the 3 PIs, let me get their names. So Adam Roundtree, Jennifer Moore, and then Hannah Hannah Skates Kettler. They're the 3 PIs, and they are a part of all 5 working groups to kind of make sure that everything would, start on task, and they usually come to our weekly meetings. So during that first forum, we met as a working group. We kind of discussed what we had to do for the next several months. And a part of those deliverables, we kind of, tried to understand what the deliverables were for the project. And so the main deliverables for the project were obviously creating a community developed plan to move 3D data preservation, documentation, and dissemination forward, creating recommendations for standards and best practices, also creating a report/white paper to be disseminated through IMLS and other communities in engage with 3D data. And then some outreach on the side. So each working group was responsible for doing their own individual work, but also writing a piece of this report/white paper. So out of the 5 working groups, I am a part of the management/storage working group. I'm one of the working group facilitators. And so what we did for the first, so from, I would say, about March to August. So the first forum was in February. The second forum was in August at University of Michigan. So for the first kind of time, that first chunk of time, we created a survey to disseminate in the community around preserving, managing 3D data. There's lots of overlap between our group and preservation. So we tried to be mindful of that. So we created a survey, we disseminated it. In the second forum was more geared as a kind of a check-in, a progress check-in with the larger group and also the PIs to really get into, to really understand the work more deeply. So the meeting schedule throughout the whole grant, which is from the beginning of 2018 to mid-2019, we have biweekly meetings. The project groups meet, the working groups, they meet at a different cadence, but usually everyone meets biweekly. And then the larger CS3DP group meets monthly. So there is a lot of check-in, but the second forum was really a good opportunity to check in more deeply and understand the overlaps between the different working groups, and then areas of commonality that we could kind of leverage. So each working group presented the work that they've been doing for the past several months, and then we also got recommendations from different groups on how maybe we should change what we're doing well, and try to gear it towards making sure that we can finish our deliverable and also write that white paper. Let's see. And so just making sure that I am hitting everything. So I think there's a lot of intersection between CS3DP and SPIN. In particular, I'm a part of the SPIN research working group, and we also have created a survey that we are close to disseminating, and it's for the community engaged with software to see what they really need out of, what they're really doing with their software, if they're preserving it, how they're doing it, and any gaps in practices. And really, CS3DP and SPIN are both, community of practice projects. So they have a lot of similarities in that sense too. So I think that, SPIN will learn a lot from CS3DP and the other way around too, so vice versa. I do think that in particular, maybe in specific, SPIN can learn, they can benefit from some of the standards and practices that are formalized and documented as a result of the CS3DP project. And I do think that CS3DP, can rely on SPIN to understand maybe a larger landscape and environment of software preservation. I do wonder how, if practices differ and how they differ, between, more general software preservation versus something, the software that is used for 3D data. So I think that's an interesting question that I'm formulating an answer to, but I think that would be great for, the larger community to think about too. I think that's it.
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Monique. You might just let everyone know there are some links. There are 2 links provided there. The progress report that was published after sort of the first part of the grant, as I understand, Monique, but also the OSF repository link. So please do, everyone, engage with that material. And I've also added links that Jonathan provided. Zach is asking the types of objects that this ES3DP group is working with. And then Monique, to wrap it up after you address Zach's question, if you could tell people maybe where to find you or how to contact you if they have more questions.
Sure. So we're primarily working with photogrammetry, laser light scanning, and then what results out of CAD. We do have kind of an outlier use case in CT scans. We had someone from Health Sciences, and so that was something they posed. But those are the main 3D objects that we're working with. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, that was great. And I might not have gotten all 3 of those. So if you can, you might double check me to make sure that I got those examples for Zach.
Sure, of course.
Okay.
So I'll be at Digital Preservation in October, and then I'll be at the Born to Be 3D Data Forum at Library of Congress. I'll put my Twitter handle in the chat box.
Perfect.
And my email in case, people prefer that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Monique. That was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have questions for Monique and Jonathan, you are absolutely encouraged to reach out. And if you have questions that you would like to pose in the chat now because you feel like they would be interesting topics to cover in their own right in a future forum, please do document those as well. So moving right along, since we are jam-packed for the rest of our hour, I'm going to hand it over to Seth Anderson. Seth, take it away.
All right. Hello. Give me one sec. Needed to turn on my camera and microphone. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Seth Anderson, and I am the Software Preservation Program Manager here at the Yale University Library. And that long-winded title essentially means that I oversee all the projects that we are undertaking related to emulation and emulation services here at the university and for the larger community. Today I am going to give a quick overview. I'll try to be very fast since we have a lot of people who still need to talk. But I'm going to give an overview of our project deliverables and a rough timeline for what we hope to do within the length of our funding. So a little background. The EASY project is a 2.5-year grant-funded program of work. Funding is from the Mellon Foundation and the Sloan Foundations. And we need to confirm this, but I think we were told that this is the first time they've co-funded a project. That could be incorrect, but an interesting fact, if true. And the goal of the project, essentially, I guess I should say that that time period, the 2.5 years, started in January of this year and will run through June of 2020. And the goal of the project is to improve infrastructure of the existing emulation as a service platform. So that's software that has been in development by the team at the University of Freiburg for a number of years, previously known as BWFLA. and under a few different names as a few different services. But to take that service and make necessary improvements to various components of the system so that it can scale up to meet the needs of a broader community of users in various disciplines. So not just a few individual deployments at university libraries or museums, but encompassing a large number of use cases. So we are looking at improvements to security and permissions management and user authentication, discovery and description within the system, and generally around software applications and emulated computer environments. Pooling of resources and implementation of a broader network functionality, which I'll explain in a second, and illustrating various mechanisms by which you can provide end user access to researchers within various contexts. Jessica, I think I forgot to explain what emulation as a service is.
That's a good one.
It's a good thing to start. So essentially, that service is a platform which simplifies the process of getting up and running with an emulator. It removes many of the technical requirements or expertise around actually running and configuring the underlying emulation software. So you don't have to set up QEMU or Sheepshaver yourself. That's already pre-configured within the system. So essentially, as a user or a configurer within the system, you can select from an existing group of configured emulation environments. So that could be, an operating system that's set up and available to you, and add more software applications to it, or content from your collection or data set or whatever you need to interact with. And then once you've made those changes to the emulation environment, which you access through a web browser, you can save those as a derivative, so a new layer on top of that underlying base image or base environment. And you can access that environment as needed on demand in the future. So the system, in addition to the simplification of emulation configuring, manages and provides access to your saved environment. So you can create multiple and diverse environments for different applications that you can return to at a later date. So for our program of work, let me share the screen really fast. We've committed to a pretty ambitious number of deliverables within the 2.5 years, but I'm pretty hopeful that we will in some ways achieve all of them. And the primary deliverable at this time is the implementation of a network, a distributed network of emulation as a service users, so what we're calling the EASY network. And that is multiple installations of the emulation as a service platform at different institutions, and the ability for those, what we're calling nodes, to communicate with each other and share resources. So if one node has a software application or an emulation environment that I would like to use, I can simply retrieve it and cache it at my local instance, and create new derivatives from that, or change it in any way that I need to provide access to my collection locally. So we are underway on that work, and we do have 5 committed initial nodes to join the network early next year. So that would be how did I say to do it, Jessica? I said to go East Coast to West Coast. So Yale, of course. uh,
List in there.
University of Virginia, Notre Dame, UC San Diego, and Stanford. Oh, and Carnegie Mellon. I missed that one. So they will all be installing the Emulation as a Service platform and then be part of that initial network and be sharing their resources. We'll also be adding additional locations throughout later in the project. To kind of provide an initial service and an initial group of software and environments to those members of the EASY network, Yale will be working throughout the 2.5 years of the project to create and seed a library of software applications and pre-configured emulation environments for the network to use. So we'll have students, opening emulators, installing software, and saving those so that the users within the network have a pool of resources to start with. And then the hope over time is that each node will add to the inventory within the network, and we'll have a growing selection of software and emulation environments available for everyone to use. Underlying all of that work is a further specification of how we describe software applications and emulated computer environments. And we're also working to contribute as much information as we can to the Wikidata knowledge base so that we are providing sort of open, machine readable data that can be used in other applications so that it's not siloed to EASY itself. And I believe, as I also mentioned, we're looking to improve the security of, I see a question. Of the service, so making improvements to the API security and integrating with existing authentication and IDP services at the various nodes. And finally, this all seems like so much, we'll be working in the next 2 years to develop various types of access platforms that illustrate the use of emulation. So one being a sort of rescanning of the user interface of the platform that is specific to scientific research software. So thinking of specific types of metadata and specific workflows that are unique to that discipline and how to support those within the system. Providing some kind of virtual reading room management tool to allow special collections to create emulated environments for their own unique materials and to control who can access those, whether that's remotely or on site, how long a researcher can use those environments. And then really quickly, just also a CD-ROM sharing service wherein libraries with CD-ROMs in their circulating collection that they would like to have a digital version of, if we can kind of show that a library has something and an emulated version of that exists within the network, we can share that between locations. And finally, an API service that will hopefully automate a lot of the configuration and selection processes, wherein if you send a file to the service, EASY or the Emulation as a Service platform can analyze that file, determine what type of environment it needs to run in, what operating system, what software it requires, and then return to the user or the person who submitted the file an environment that's running that file already. So you go from submission of your file to having access to it as quickly as possible. So I'll also just give an idea of our current roadmap. Right now, through the rest of the year, we are focused on, of course, improving security and getting the easy network functionality set up. So looking at how we'll actually exchange data between the locations and exchanging metadata as well. And then in the coming phases, we'll of course be rolling out the service to the first group of network locations. We'll be looking for improvements to the UI, which is going to be a big undertaking, so that it's a bit easier for users to understand and interact with without a lot of training or documentation to go to review. And then all the various access services that we're going to be building on top of this. There's a lot more underlying all of this. I'll just say that we have a pretty great team working on this. Myself here at Yale, Ewan Cochran, the head of Digital Preservation Services, is our PI. Jessica is working with us to lead our communications and outreach, and she's been doing a lot of the work with the nodes in the network and to get them up and running. Development is being handled by a company called OpenSLX, which is an offshoot of that team from Freiburg that has been doing a lot of the work on this platform for the last, I think, 10 years, I think. And we'll also be working with our library IT team here at Yale for some of the front-end engineering. Who else? Kat Thornton, who has done a lot of the work on the Wikidata for Digital Preservation project, which will have its portal release in the next month or so, I believe. She's helping us with that relationship with Wikidata and thinking about how to contribute and retrieve information from that data source. And is that everyone?
Seth, maybe one question. It looks like David is asking about opportunities for new orgs to join the network. So maybe just touching on that second round of nodes would be helpful, because that might be a question more than one person has.
Yeah, so we are, of course, looking to expand the network as much as possible. We have kept it to a sort of a smaller group to start, just so that we don't overwhelm our resources. But we are looking for prospects for joining the network, for institutions to join the network later in this program of work. So in the fall of 2019, probably. But the goal of the project, of course, is to start up a service that persists beyond the 2.5 years of this grant. So easy as a network and a service will continue after that. And we are currently working on, brainstorming what our service model will look like, what it means to join the network, various ways that institutions can join the network. So I think, as you can see in the end of this in phase 4 in our last 6 months, we've kind of tacked hosted services here. So there may also be opportunities to join the network via something that is hosted at Yale or other institutions. So there are a number of different ways to get involved. You can email Jessica to find out more of that, or go to the website, which I think is linked to in the notes.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely a link to the current information about the program of work, and there will be future updates to the SPIN website that build out the content and deliverables for both the EASY project and the FCOP project. And with that, Seth, I know people have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've used up my time.
No, that was great. That was great. I mean, we're lucky. We have this jam-packed schedule today. I hope that this is a good survey for everyone, and maybe we can zoom in on some of these topics in our winter community forum. So Seth, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
So now I'm going to hand it over. We have a couple more of some really juicy updates that I know that everyone is eager to hear about. So I'm going to immediately turn it over to Brandon Butler to give us a rundown on the Code of Best Practices for Fair Use and Software Preservation. Oh, pardon me. Excuse me, Brandon, not you. Neil is going to go first and give us a rundown on the Software Deposit Guidelines for Researchers, which is a JISC and Software Sustainability Institute collaboration. Neil, could you give us some info on that? And then we will turn it over to Brandon. And finally, Hannah will give a little bit of info about where to find the SPIN prospectus and what that's all about, and we will try to wrap it up at time. Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. So I'm Neil Chu Hong. I'm the director of the Software Sustainability Institute and also involved in SPIN as part of the Training and Education Working Group. So I'm going to be talking about these guidelines that we've been producing as part of a JISC-funded program called the Research Data Shared Service. But we're talking here about guidance for research software rather than research data. I'm just going to try and see if I can bring up my the right window, because I realize I have several windows open here. Okay, so hopefully I'm sharing something that looks like software deposit guidance for researchers. So our aim with this project, which has recently finished its main phase, was to develop and publish guidance for researchers who were trying to deposit software source code primarily, in the same way that they might be depositing research data. So this is guidance focused at everyday researchers, PIs, and also research data managers who might have to deal with the data that is being deposited. We wanted this to be around the kind of idea of having research software as a research output and what the implications were for researchers who were doing this. So this guidance was developed via a set of workshops where we got input from a number of different people in the community, literature review, and also developing on guidelines that we have produced in the past through our own experience. What you see here is the very first version of these guidelines, and they are structured as a set of linked guidance with workflows and checklists that people can follow and adapt. So I've scrolled down the page, hopefully, and you should be able to see that there are a number of different guides. First of all, looking at the reasons why you might choose to deposit software, and then going on to things like when to deposit it, where to deposit it, what to deposit, what not to deposit, and how you deal with some of the curation of software deposits. Each of these also has a kind of simplified workflow as a diagram, which takes the reader through the different steps that they'll need to take into account when they are choosing to deposit software. So this first version was published in early August, and it's mostly the work of my colleague Mike Jackson, and where we are now is looking to try and get feedback on the guidance. So in particular, we're looking to find out feedback on whether the level of this guidance is appropriate, whether the structure is what people are looking for. So does linked guidance rather than having one large guide work better for people? Are there any missing topics that people in those sort of three categories would be expecting to see? So that's things that researchers might want to see, things that PIs might want to see, and institutional research data managers might want to see. And what do you think are the most useful guides for the people that you work with? So we're wanting to get an idea of where we should be putting the next set of revisions in and where we should be putting effort on the updating of these guides. There is a link to a survey in Google Forms that are in the software preservation notes for this meeting, and we'd really love if you could circulate both the link to the guidance and the link to the survey to your colleagues and collaborators so we can get feedback on this first version of the guidance. And with that, I will stop sharing the screen. I'll just show you the, maybe I'll just try and show the other guidance if I can. Accept. So there's the Google form, and I'll stop sharing now and see if there are any questions.
That was fantastic, Neil. Thank you so much for walking everyone through, particularly how the guidelines are organized. It's nice to see that, to just show people the web page and see how they can navigate to determine which of the guidelines are the most helpful. Yeah, highly encourage any questions for Neil here, because feedback would be super helpful for that group. And, the idea is most definitely that these become a resource that people use and potentially even modify locally, but then share sort of what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, I should also mention there's a link to the GitHub repository where all of these guidelines have been developed. And if you're interested in collaborating, then please do just get in touch with me or open an issue or even just modify them directly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Neil. And as you can see, everyone, please note, Neil has provided both his email address, his Software Sustainability Institute email address, as well as his Twitter handle. And you can see, you can find Neil, you can go and grab him and ask him all kinds of questions at the following events. So Neil will definitely be attending both sort of e-science, open science, and research data management, as well as you can see some supercomputing, but also the Digital Preservation Award. So there's quite a variety of contexts in which you can interact with Neil and provide feedback in person. Highly encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and if you come up and find me at one of these events, I'll give you a sticker. So rewarded for your interaction.
There you go. There you go. That's all the more reason. Okay, and with that, thank you so much, Neil. And we'll hand it over to Brandon to tell us about the upcoming release of the Code of Best Practices for Fair Use in Software Preservation.
Hello. So yeah, we are on the edge of our collective seats now as the Code of Best Practices in Fair Use for Software Preservation is nearing readiness for release. So I think many of you, looking at the participants list, I know are familiar with this project, and SPIN has just been absolutely integral in all of the work we've been doing all along. So I will, but I won't assume any familiarity. So let me give a little quick background on what the Code of Best Practices is. This is a Sloan-funded project through the Association of Research Libraries to develop a Code of Best Practices in Fair Use for Software Preservation. What a Code of Best Practices in Fair Use can do for you is it helps a community deliberate together about the most common or most pressing copyright-related concerns that might challenge their core mission activities, and then deliberate together about the ways that the flexible fair use doctrine and copyright might provide some relief for this for the problems that you might be facing as you think about the things that you need to do to get your job done. And what we found in the first part of our work was that that copyright has been a major impediment to software preservation in the past. In particular, an impediment to scaling up activities and working cooperatively. So in all of the literature that we reviewed, and then very much in the interviews that we did confidentially with many folks in this community, what we heard was that once folks got beyond the bare minimum of, moving things from a fragile medium to a more stable medium, copyright uncertainty kicked in almost immediately. And the main strategy that folks had tried in the past was to seek permission, and that those permission-seeking strategies were really frustrating for a number of reasons. So there's actually a white paper, if you follow the link in the notes that Jessica has put there to our homepage for the project. We wrote up a white paper about the kind of levels of frustration that we were hearing, and that white paper refers to this as a kind of permissions culture, which is an extremely common problem for practitioners who have to interact with copyright law. The assumption is that permission is really required, and in fact, when fair use is available to you, it's not always required. So again, with generous support from the Sloan Foundation, we've been talking to folks to help kind of solidify what a fair use rationale might be able to do for the community. And we've already had all of those discussions. We've sat down. The team consists of myself. I'm the Director of Information Policy. I guess I should have introduced myself. I'm the Director of Information Policy at the University of Virginia Library. I'm a copyright lawyer. And Peter Yazzie and Pat Aufderheide, who are both professors at American University. Peter's a eminent fair use scholar, and Pat is a communications scholar. They've been doing this fair use best practices stuff for many years, so they bring their experience and their methodology to the project. And then Krista Cox at ARL helped me and Peter and Pat to organize our thoughts and organize these meetings. So we've now distilled everything we heard from the community into a series of best practices. Those practices, that draft is out for legal review. What that means is we have a team of independent legal experts, lawyers, and in particular experts in fair use and copyright who have no affiliation to the project. They're all nice people. We know them, but they have no investment in the project. They've just been brought in at the last stage to look over the best practices the community developed and to give them a kind of seal of approval that this is within a reasonable realm of interpretation of the fair use doctrine. The fair use doctrine is flexible, so there's not going to be a clear right answer. That's part of why these best practices are so helpful to people, because they define a clearer set of answers within a realm that seems sort of nebulous. And so our legal reviewers are going to tell us that yes, and so far they've been extremely helpful and extremely affirmative, that yes, these practices are within the reasonable interpretation of the law. So we're finishing up that legal review process literally any day now. Once that's done, we're going to then go out to some organizations and seek endorsements. So we hope to publish at the end of this month with endorsements from some big library organizations to help give the documents a sense of gravitas and sort of validity in the community. We'll be then barnstorming this fall a couple of the big preservation conferences. So we'll be at IPRES in September, and we'll be at DLF at Las Vegas in October. We'll also be doing a lot of online programming. So we hope to do a webinar series, at least one webinar series, perhaps a podcast. We've got funding from Sloan to follow up on this code for several months after it comes out, and to encourage people to help them to understand it and encourage them to implement it. So please let us know if there's something, if you're having an event where we could maybe pipe ourselves in or join in to help promote the code. I'll end with a quick rundown of the content of the code. We address 5 core scenarios that we heard about again over and over again from the community, and these go kind of in ascending order of levels of access, with a kind of 5th thing that kind of doesn't fit into that order, but you'll see. So the first scenario was the basic preservation, the first step of preservation, accessioning, stabilizing, evaluating, and describing software as a digital artifact. You know, moving things off of unstable media, booting them up and taking a look so you can see what they are, confirming that they are what they say they are, all that kind of stuff, the basic stuff you do behind the curtain. That's covered by situation 1. Situation 2 is documenting software in operation. So we found that a lot of folks were capturing video, screenshots, all kinds of ways of preserving what the kind of authentic experience of software in operation looks and feels like for research access. Situation 3, actually providing access to running, working software for folks to use for their research, teaching, and learning. That's within the institution or within the collection. And then situation 4, working cooperatively across institutions and collections to share software, again, in support of teaching, learning, and research. And then finally, situation 5 is kind of the odd one out, but it addresses source code and preservation and access to source code. So those are the things we hope to talk about and help folks to navigate. And yeah, I did see a question about US law, and I see Jessica gave the answer that I would have given too, which is yes, fair use is a US doctrine, but I would say that our hope is that flexible fair use style doctrines are actually being proposed and adopted in more and more jurisdictions. You know, the EU is in the midst of a big copyright reform discussion. And so I hope maybe we can set an example. You know, this is what you can do when you have a provision like this. It's a really powerful doctrine if you have it, and maybe we can make the case for fair use for all the folks that I think would benefit from having it in their own legal system. And I would love to answer your questions, although I know we're past our time already.
Yeah, so I'm going to take this moment to thank Brandon so much for giving that overview. And hopefully that's a teaser. And as soon as the code comes out, everyone is going to be racing to either download it and or figure out how they can get a printed copy. I have no doubt. And again, just to repeat, Brandon will be at iPres in Boston for all of you that will be there, and we'll be exploring the code. So there will be a deeper dive at that point in time, and also some virtually mediated opportunities for Brandon, Pat, Peter, and Chris to go into more detail on the code. So just to reiterate, that's upcoming, and we'll make sure that those announcements get out to everyone as far and wide as we can. The last update I'm going to provide, and I know we're at time, and if some people need to leave, I completely understand. However, we just wanted to give an update. This is a SPIN update from Hannah Ballard, Educopia Institute Communications Manager, in regards to the current SPIN prospectus for anyone that has been seeing those tweets go out that had any questions about that campaign. And I'll just, before I hand it over to Hannah so that she's the last person to speak, I just want to say thank you again to everyone. As soon as Hannah wraps up, I'll say thank you one more time, and I will say goodbye to everyone and close down the recording. So thanks again. Second to the last time I'll say that, and I hope that you all will put any questions that you still have remaining into the chat box so that we can capture those. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll take it away. Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here chatting to you all. I see a lot of people on this call who I've been working closely with. Jessica obviously has been working very, very closely with for a very long time on the release of the prospectus, which we are so delighted to have out into the world. It's been through many rounds of revisions with the governance and the advisory board and then internally at Educopia. And we think that we really produced something powerful and substantive and beautiful, I think, too. So we're really excited about it. I put the link to the prospectus in the running notes, so feel free to open that up and have a look. But what I really want to draw your attention to today, and I'll do it briefly because I know we're at time, is the fact that because we've released this prospectus, we are just trying to sing about it at every opportunity that we can. And that's taking the shape of a 3 to 4 week campaign, primarily on Twitter, but also using the StackTrace newsletter that Jessica has masterfully put together. And especially right now, we're sort of hitting Twitter hard, and we're using the hashtag #JoinSpin. And I've been tagging a lot of you, and I really, really appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into helping us amplify that message. But if I could just put in a plea for anyone else who's interested in what SPIN's doing and helping us amplify our message and get our work out there, please check out our Twitter. It's linked in the notes, and retweet us and like us. It really makes a difference. Every bit counts. We're trying to get the word out because, yeah, y'all have done such fantastic work over the last months and years, and we want to make sure that in this moment, in this really pivotal moment for SPIN and the prospectus, that we get the word out about it. So please do watch out for Twitter. And then in October, we'll be doing a special edition Stack Trace. There will be kind of a roundup of all the various legs of the campaign. And you can explore some of the stuff that we've created in the notes, but I'll just say for the Stack Trace, that'll be a really meaty deliverable for us. So when you see that come to your inbox, if you're on that list, please do feel free to forward it to anyone who you think might be interested, or to share it with any listservs. That would be tremendously helpful. And again, because we're at time, I'll stop there. Keep it short, keep it brief. But if y'all have any questions, I've put the Software Preservation Network Twitter in there, and then my email as well. So do feel free to reach out, and many, many thanks in advance for any help that you can give us in getting the word out about all of this exciting work. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Hannah. Much appreciated. Ditto to everything that Hannah just said. And again, thank you to all of you. What an awesome kickoff to these software curation and preservation community forums, to make sure that they are indeed community forums, operative word community there. Please do make sure that you fill out that Google form. I'll send out a reminder between quarterly calls, just to make sure that we shape these around topics that are of particular interest to all of you. So thank you again, and I hope you have a really beautiful rest of your day and or evening. Goodbye, everyone.